You've seen my books. No, I'm not going to tell you which books, nor who I am, so don't ask. I assure you, though, if you're a big reader, or even a sort of reader, then you've probably read, or at least heard of, some of my stuff. My stuff, in the hypothetical sense of the phrase. As the title says, I was never actually the one who wrote my books. Again, don't ask me who really did. Not because of privacy or theft laws or anything. I just don't know. I used to be a plumber, of all things. Not the most glamorous of professions, but it paid pretty well, seeing how almost nobody wanted to do it. My dad trained me right out of high school, and pretty soon I'd saved enough to move to my own apartment. A few years later, I decided I may as well sell my soul and get locked into a mortgage, because at least then the rent money wouldn't be going to waste. The idea was to get a few roommates and have them pay for my house instead, but I'm a private person. It's not that I liked living alone per se, but I never had many friends growing up. I didn't know who to invite to the other rooms, and the idea of strangers moving in with me... Ugh. I read. That's what you do when you're 26 and you don't have friends. You read books and pretend you do have friends, and when you finish one book and realize you're still alone, you pick up the next one. It's a bit like alcohol. You have to drink another glass in the morning to recover from the damage of the glass from the night before. Except, nobody ever applauds you for getting drunk as a hobby the way they do for reading. If that all sounds like a terribly depressed way to view life, well, it's probably because I was. Am. However you want to say it. I was in what you might call a drought period. One of those times when you read something exceptional the month before, and now you can't find anything that compares to it. I tried a few series, but nothing piqued my interest, and I'd all but given up, resorted to watching Friends for the 30th time instead. That's when I found The Basement. Basement is a strong word. Crawl space is more accurate. I was pulling up the carpeting in one of the guest rooms during some renovations, and there it was. This flat door with a brass handle on the closet floor. Like any new homeowner, I opened it and hopped down. Rot and mildew and something metallic, all bundled into one scent. Maybe a cat had died here? It was possibly 4.5 feet tall. I had to stoop all the way over to shuffle forwards. I was barely 10 steps in when it appeared on the ground. A stack of papers. They weren't in any sort of an envelope. No rubber band holding them together or even a staple. About 20 sheets were stacked one on top of another, perfectly white as if they'd just come from the printer, even though nobody had been down here for years judging from the age of the carpet. The passage ended a little after that, so I grabbed the papers, climbed out, and closed the trap door. It wasn't until that night, when I finished tearing out the carpet and the emptiness of the house was getting to me, that I actually stopped to read the papers. The story on them. I was enthralled. I didn't move until I'd finished them, but each word, each sentence gripped me and dragged me in. It was real. That's what it felt like. The story on the paper was reality, and my life was the fake thing made of ink. If only I could keep reading, I could keep living, and... I turned the last page. The story stopped mid-sentence. I flipped through the pages over and over, hoping somehow I'd missed a page, that there was more. I reread the entire thing. Then again. Then again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called in sick. I paced the house. I tried watching TV. I tried reading, but nothing worked. I was obsessed. I had to finish the story, but the ending didn't even exist. After 2 days of this, I'd had enough. I'll bury it, I thought. I'll bury it, and my mind will accept it's over. Instead of digging a hole, though, I went back to the crawl space. I would leave it where I found it and try to forget the story. When I went back down, a fresh stack of pages awaited me. That's how it started. New pages wouldn't appear until the old ones were read, but that was no problem. I read them with a savage hunger, chapter after chapter. I called in sick to work again, but when my dad tried to come visit, I told him not to, that he'd only get sick. I read for hours and hours, taking trips back down to the crawl space where new pages would await me each time, until finally, it was finished. The end. I popped down one more time just to see if there was some sort of an epilogue, but the crawl space was empty. The story was over. For weeks, I searched online for clues about who had written the story. Nothing came up. I reached out to the past owner of the house. "There's a crawl space?" they asked me. "We never knew." I sat on the book for weeks and weeks, obsessed, but resolved to give it up, to put it past me. Eventually, I reached out to some literary agents. One more sip of alcohol to cure the hangover. From what I hear, it takes months and months of waiting to hear back after you reach out to agents. The ones I reached out to took days. Each of them requested to read the whole book, and each of them offered me contracts within the week. "You're the best writer I've ever signed," said the agent I went with. I didn't correct her. Publishing went much the same. It should have taken months. Within weeks, I'd signed with a major publishing house. The editing process that should have taken months took days. "I can't imagine changing a word of this," my editor told me. "You're an amazing writer." I said nothing. Most authors face mediocre success at best. The ones you hear about, those are the exceptions. For every career author, there's 100 authors that never make back their advance. That should have been my expectation, but even then, I knew. I knew something was different about this book. Not just the way I'd found it, but the things it did to me. To others. It was enthralling. In the way a blind kitten crawling towards a cliff is enthralling. Once you glance at it, you can't look away. Sure enough, it was a bestseller. It won awards. I earned back my advance in weeks. They invited me to talk shows and conventions, but I declined them all. Don't get used to this, I told myself. It was one book. It wasn't even yours. The inflow of money was great, fantastic, really, but I didn't quit my regular job. It wasn't like I'd be writing another book, and eventually, everybody would calm down. They'd forget about my book, and I'd be forgotten. The friends would stop calling. Things would go back to normal. And then, one night, when I couldn't sleep, after I'd spent hours staring up at the ceiling of my lonely bedroom, I went back down. Some deep, slumbering part of me had already known they'd be there. The new pages. That was how it had worked the first time, after all. I had to read the new pages for new ones to appear. It made sense. I would have to publish the last book for a new one to appear. I read the new chapters. I visited the crawl space 10 more times that night until I'd finished the whole thing. The next day, I quit my job. and so began my new life. I timed it purposefully. Every 6 to 8 months, I would submit my new manuscript. Every 6 months, I would take a trip back down to the cellar. Each book release shot me back up to the top of the bestseller list. Money rolled in steadily, more than I knew what to do with. It wasn't like I was going to buy a new house. No. That much was obvious. I would live where I did until I died, because I needed to. For my career, I told myself. I have to stay here for my career. Even then, though, I think I knew. I wasn't staying there to support my lifestyle. It was a nice perk. Being rich certainly had its benefits, but it was about the books. It was always about the books. I reread them constantly. What else was there to do? The hours most writers take to write was free time for me. Might as well read, reread, consume. At first, I would see how long I could go without picking one of my books. 1 day, 2, 3. That was the limit, I discovered. By day 3, my palms would get sweaty and my stomach would start cramping. Eventually, I stopped resisting. Reading was all I did with my time. I quit all other books. I did try to read them, but none of them satisfied me. They were flat, like the 2D version of the 3D stories the crawl space gave me. They were the lotus flowers from the Greek myths. Once you try one, regular food could never taste the same. At least it's just me, I told myself. My one small comfort. I could fade away, give in, and that was all right. Nobody else would be harmed. Besides my dad, nobody cared about me. I wasn't hurting anybody. I convinced myself that was the truth. I really believed the books were just affecting me. Until my first book signing. I'm not entirely sure what convinced me to do it. Maybe it was my agent or publisher who both pestered me to do one for years. Partially, it was due to one of the rare recovery periods where I was actively trying to stop reading. Always to little success. But I did one. My very first book signing. The bookstore filled up. Literally, they were turning people away. Hundreds showed up to meet me, the false author of these best-selling books. They were so excited to meet me. I saw the anticipation as I did a reading. I was almost looking forward to the book signing, despite the hours-long line. "Yours are my favorite books," one woman told me. "These are what got me into reading," said another. "They're the only thing I read now." "Glad to hear it," I said, chuckling as I signed. I looked up. The man wasn't smiling. "I'm not," he said. He walked away. I started noticing it then. The jittery look in the eyes. The way people desperately clutched their copies of my books. Not in a loving way. Not like a child clinging to a teddy bear. More like victims of the Titanic hanging from the rails as it tipped. "What else do you read?" I asked a teenager and her father. The teenager shook her head. "Nothing. Why would I?" To another fan holding a battered copy, I asked, "How many times have you read it?" She laughed nervously. I don't know. I can't remember." She burst into tears. "I can't stop. Why can't I stop?" Almost nobody reacted as she tore out of the bookstore, sobbing. It was in all of them, that frantic obsession in me. their simultaneous loathing and love for the books. Some of them outright scowled at me, like they hadn't wanted to come, but hadn't been able to resist. It was the very last woman in line who scared me the most. She didn't even look up at me. She stared down at the book in her hands, the very first one I'd ever published. She never responded to my questions. She never put it down. I recognized the cover. It was the first edition of my first book, which meant she'd been one of the earliest people ever to pick me up. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her teeth were falling out like she couldn't spare the time to brush them, and her skin was a sickly yellow. I never did another book signing. It gets worse as time goes on. That's what I've realized. The longer you read them, the more dependent you are on them. I've tried to stop publishing. Of course I have, a dozen times. Look at what my books are doing to people. Look at what they'll continue to do. Even if I could stop, though, it wouldn't matter. Once you've tasted the lotus petal, you can never go back. No one I've talked to has been able to quit once they've read something from the crawl space. All those people at the book signing, all my thousands and thousands of readers, it's too late for them, the way it's too late for me. My hair falls off in clumps now. My skin is yellow. And my teeth? Nearly all of them are gone. Even so, I continue. Year after year, climbing down through that trapdoor, sending off my manuscripts to the publisher. I can't stop. I don't want to anymore. It's easier to just give in. Sip by sip by sip. It's almost a relief to grab the pages the crawl space gives me and pump them out into the world. That's the only way I get more of them. It's not like I can write my own stories. This entire time, I've never written a word myself. Not one. Not even these ones.